welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire, and Mike Lano. And we have a very special guest tonight. Would you like to introduce her, Mike?
This is a close friend of mine for many decades, and we're starting out with a tribute to Candi Divine, a person we both knew, and Brittany Brown, famous lady wrestler, promoter, trainer, TV actress. She's done everything there is to do, but she has an amazing life outside of wrestling as well. But Brittany, Candi passed. We've lost a number of other friends like Reggie Parks and referee Mickey J that Evan and I and Russ will be talking about. But tell us your thoughts on this one, because this was not quite a shocker, but still Candi was so young and so full of life and everything.
Yes, this was really, she's kicked out many times before and come back and been back in action, and I don't mean in the ring, but in the action of life. She was back in supermarkets, restaurants, everything. And then all of a sudden, bang, she's sick again. And I got to tell you, never in a million years did I think she was going to pass away. This really hit home.
I forget if like 91, 92 was your first Cauliflower Alley. Maybe it was before that, but also the three of us would see each other, every year at when Moolah sort of overtook the LIWA. She and Johnny Mae Young, the original leaders of that group, were Penny Banner, Teresa Thies, who was not just a legendary female wrestler, but she broke her husband, Ray Stevens, into the biz, and Betty Clark.
Yep.
Anyway, we would see Candi at these events, and like you and I, she was a lot gentler than we were, but she had a mischievous little sense of humor, and she would call bullshit on bullshit. And nobody does it like Brittany Brown, but Candi, her own way to a lesser extent would. And she was, she had a big heart. She was like a pixie. Yeah, really nice person, and in a hardened sport, or entertainment sport, it's not easy to be that. She was, and she started a fan club. If our listeners don't know, Candi Divine in like around 75, 76 for Lanny Poffo, and then later added Randy in there, and they were the ones that broke her into the biz. So Lanny will be listening to this, and they had a hand as well at the same time in helping break in Sherry Martel, who was a good friend of Debbie Combs and Candi Divine. But what other things come to mind when you think of some of the times we had with her, or seeing her, in the 90s and stuff? And you might have known her way before that as well, like in the 80s.
No, I think I met her. It was at the LIWA, probably in, maybe late 80s, early 90s. And we fought as a tag team there, her and I. And then, of course, so it had to be late 80s, because then I met her again and we fought as a tag team again when she was the Goddess for LPWA. So it was Brittany Brown and the Goddess versus, I think it was Ivory, but that wasn't her name there, and maybe Penelope Paradise or something. But yeah, she was a great tag team partner. She was a great opponent. I worked against her for WWWA in Pennsylvania a few times against her, as opposed to her being my tag team partner. But I mean, she was great. She took care of somebody that was newer, because I started after her. She was older than me, and she started younger. But she protected me. She protected herself. She did everything right. And, she was real fun and funny outside of the ring. Great person. And it's just a real big loss.
Yeah, I remember seeing Candi Divine wrestle against Leilani Kai in the WWF in the mid 80s. And I also saw her fight Medusa Michelli in the AWA. And both of those matches were well fought and well performed. That was one thing that, back then there was a big difference between male wrestling and women's wrestling. And I think, folks like yourself, Leilani Kai, Candi Divine, Wendy Richter. They helped close that gap between, you know, the way women's wrestling was perceived, used to be perceived, and how we perceive it today. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That was just, you know, what you're talking about was just about the right time period where the gap was closing. You're absolutely correct. You know, and I say kudos to every single one of the ones you mentioned there. Great people, great workers, worked with them all, wonderful. But to lose, you know, it's bad enough we lost Sherry, but now, you know, Candi now too, just ridiculous.
And Matilda the Hun also
Right,
left us
right.
recently.
I think Medusa, because they had known each other in the AWA or it had worked, I think Candi even got a couple of maybe dark matches with Debbie Medusa Michelli on once she came in as the Alundra Blaze character, that being Medusa.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, on some TV, you know, before Medusa had some say and brought in Bull Nakano and Aja Kong, and
right.
I'm not sure how Rhonda Singh was brought in as Bertha Faye, which, you know, wasn't to her liking. But there was another friend. I was looking at some old emails way back in the 90s from Rhonda Singh. She would email me from Puerto Rico or Japan or Mexico with results and stuff. And she had worked with Candi like in Puerto Rico, and they were good friends too. You know, it was a smaller circle then, but, you know, Candi, just way too young, too nice a person. And yeah, it's hard to believe we've lost her, Sherry, Luna, and
no, that was I was very close with Luna. That was tough. That was very tough.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have any stories about working with Candi in the ring that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I just, you know, I looked up to her, you know, and she didn't act like a veteran or anything. She didn't act like she had one day more than me in the ring. Treated me as a complete equal, took care of me, didn't care that I was younger, that I was greener. It didn't matter. You know, she treated everybody exactly the same. She was just great. You know, I heard some stories, you know, much later on of her, and Mike, I think you know about this one, when she fell and broke her ankle in like so many different places, and there was all kinds of screws and this and that in there. Nobody thought she'd ever come back. She came back and wrestled for 25 more years.
That's wrestling, because you've had a ton of injuries. You know, other friends of Candi's who I'll have some things I'll be reading, like from Debbie Combs and other folks, Malia Hosaka, obviously Judy Martin and Leilani Kai. Yeah, everybody was really super fond of her. She did a lot of touring too. You know, which it's not easy, because I think she was often by herself, and you know, that's rough. You've done a lot of that yourself. Did she ever come up and do seminars for you in the various promotions that you were running, and etc.? Or I don't know if you employed her, because you've also, you know, worn many hats in wrestling, and of course we're talking to Brittany Brown in the New England area.
No, actually the one that did the seminars for us was Tom Pritchett.
Okay. That's more folks. Well, nobody better than well, I won't call him a doc, because
the doctor.
I'm a legit doc. He's in name only. Like there's so many others. But let me see if you have any last things to say before we let you go. It's very late where you are, and if you have some things or upcoming things you'd like to plug, or your social media. You had a nice post. Somebody out of the blue complimented you and didn't want anything, and that's kind of hard to find these days.
Yeah, I'll say. No kidding. Yeah, no, I'm pretty much, you know, just on Facebook and Twitter. Brittany Brown 1. That's me on both of them. So if you need to find me, that's where I'm at.
And unlike the singer of who's lesser known than Brittany Brown, Brittany spells it Brittany.
Yes.
I also had another question for you, which is there's been some talk about China being added as a solo participant to the WWE Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts about that?
Ooh, I would be very surprised if that happened. I don't know if you know, but I went to the same school as Chyna and Paul Levesque. We were all from Killikowalski's, and so I know them both well, very well. And yeah, I would be very surprised if that were true.
Well, certainly not true this year, because the talk is Undertaker Mark Calloway is supposed to be the sole inductant, and it's odd they're doing a 2-for-1 thing. So if you buy a ticket in Dallas to SmackDown, you're going to also get to go free of charge to the Hall of Fame. So that's not happening this year. But
wow.
when Joni Lauer came in, you were her elder, correct? You were already,
Yeah, correct.
Sure, you assisted a greenie, fresh off the street greenie. So she came there prior to going to Lillian's, Moolah's. She came first and was broken in by you and Walter.
Walter trained her, and I'm not really sure who else trained her there. But what happened is she came in there right around the time I was leaving and started my own promotion, and I promoted for 8 years. And Walter was, I was Walter's champion at the time, and I had been for probably 13 years at that time. And apparently she wanted to be the champion, so she told Walter she'd work for half the price that I was getting. So that's what happened.
Now, what was it like running your own promotion? I'm not that familiar with the promotion you ran.
Oh, it was called World Wrestling Alliance out of New England. We ran Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont. We did that for about 8 years, and it was great. We had all the guys from WWE that were in, I believe it was OVW at the time. We had Kurt Angle, we had Edge, we had Val Venus, Goldust, everybody they sent us. And this is when nobody else was getting them.
And what was that like to be a female promoter of such a high-profile federation?
Well, it was great. It was really awesome. But if you're in partnership with somebody and somebody wants to overspend and drive it into the ground, that's pretty much what happened. So there's somebody contacting me recently, an old promoter from the New England Wrestling Federation in Vermont, and another wrestler that's about a 40-year veteran, also from Walters, and they want to start the New England Wrestling Federation back up. And they contacted me a couple of years ago. COVID happened, and now they just contacted me literally a couple of days ago, and they want to start that back up in Massachusetts. They want to go to Provincetown, Martha's Vineyard, which you can only get there on a boat. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but they seem to think it's going to be a sellout.
They're going to have
something that you're...
Wait, Martha's Vineyard? That would be the last place I'd put wrestling. That's kind of like the Hamptons in New York. It's
It's where Woodstock happened, right?
No, Woodstock didn't happen there, but it's a high-profile, expensive, resorty, wonderful place, and I don't think the people there, it's just not a place to bring, wrestling unless you have a family-friendly show, perhaps, maybe part of a county fair, which they don't have on Martha's Vineyard.
They don't have that. No.
This one, Carly Simon and, all the bigwigs.
Right, exactly. And, and they want to do Provincetown, too, which is, one of the guys that I mentioned to you that's a 40-year veteran, he did a gay gimmick, and he did it very, very well. And he seems to think Provincetown, because it's known for that, he thinks that will go over wonderfully there. And I don't know. We'll see. I think we're going to... I don't know.
Do gay people gravitate to wrestling? I think they'd be more inclined to go to Diana Ross or Cher show. I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but I'm saying I don't know if that's at the top of their activities list that they want to go and see. But Russ, let me ask you something, because I know we're keeping Brittany Brown here. It's 3 hours later. Is Evan? Were we going to bring up Evan later, or is he not?
Yeah, I'm going to try to reach him so that we can talk about what was going on with.
So we can say hi to Brittany, because she was on many, many times on our old show Legends and was gracious enough to do that. Brittany, you were one of the first people I know, being female, and wrestling has been white, older, male dominated, which is kind of still insane. But you're one of the first female I knew to own your own ring, other than one other person out here on the West Coast who completely cheated. I won't say her name, Candi Divine and Debbie Combs on pay. Similar to both of them, I've forgotten that Candi and Debbie Combs, maybe some other females along with male wrestlers, were cheated by their claim by Leah Maivia, her promotion in Hawaii. And, they were almost felt stranded there. I remember Candi and Debbie telling me that.
Yeah.
And upsetting, because we have so few, a history of so few, not currently, until the Dixie Carter era, but, back in the 70s, 80s, so few. There was Ann Gunkel, took on the whole NWA, like 72 through 74 or early 75, and was very successful, but few female promoters. So we don't like hearing about shenanigans going on with a female promoter, or particularly
Right.
was the widow of Peter Maivia.
Right.
And I know it was upsetting for Candi. It was upsetting for anybody, but
Of course.
we try to put female promoters on a pedestal, and in this case, maybe not. So
Yeah.
Young Rock with ask some questions. Would you watch Young Rock on NBC, the second turning? Is all this legit? Because I went and covered and shot her shows when she'd bring the Honolulu wrestling to San Jose for quite a few tapings, and none of those guys ever worked for her, either there or Honolulu, meaning Andre, the Wild Samoans, Iron Sheik, Randy Savage, Ric Flair. None of them worked for her personally. They worked for others there, but did you ever work for Leah? I forget if you came out to the thing that, I don't know if you worked for her or Edwina Burns in California. Did you work for either of those people?
No, I think they were before my time.
That was I remember, because Moolah was part of that, and that was that weird match. I think it's the only time Moolah ever worked in the ring in a singles with Misty Blue Sims, who's from, I think.
Oh, right.
That was that thing where nobody got paid. It never aired. They filmed all of this stuff. They brought in Malia, and I forget who the other wrestlers were. Carmine was brought out for some reason to manage the heels.
Yep.
Russ, let me know when you got Evan up.
He said he'll come on after Brittany's off, so I guess the two of them are just going to be ships passing in the night. Brittany, I wanted to ask you also, what in current wrestling right now do you enjoy watching?
Honestly, the only thing I watch is AEW.
Really? Well, that's very interesting. What are your thoughts about the Cody Rhodes situation?
I think it's all a work.
Okay, well,
let me ask you, before we let her go, one of my best friends on the planet for life, are you watching the women? Like Serena Deeb, I'm super impressed with. Excellent. I like the Japanese women. And I like all of them. The women are fine. They are trying to have some longer, meaningful storylines, and
right.
The stuff with Britt Baker now and Thunder Rosa. We were so blessed to see her start on the West Coast.
Right.
Some of your friends, La Rosa Negra, and then the other one that doesn't talk, that also wears face paint, and to see her have evolved. But I think it's cool, and the women often main event.
Yes.
This is so different and so long overdue. I know
very much.
Both you and Candi Divine would be happy to see women in main events. Did you ever get a chance to see, about a year ago, the Thunder Rosa Britt Baker, that bloodbath match?
Absolutely, it was awesome.
I was going to ask, because we've never talked. What were your thoughts on that? That most people had that on their match of the year, whether female or male. Very refreshing to see that kind of attention. And man, that was a hell of a match.
It was. I was very impressed. I thought it was amazing. I thought whatever they they're getting. It is well deserved, very well deserved. They probably couldn't pay him enough for doing that match.
Yeah, no, that really certainly put both. I mean, it elevated the women. That's one to go over, but you want to get over more than go over. That old adage
exactly
is so.
Brittany, I had another question. What do you think the future of women's wrestling is about, and who do you think is gonna develop to become one of some of the more major stars in the next few years in women's wrestling?
Well, I mean, obviously there's Charlotte Flair. I don't know how much longer she's going to do it. Maybe another 5 years, I would guess. And obviously she's earned every accolade she's gotten as well. And I think she definitely proved that I'm not just Ric Flair's daughter. She did prove herself. As much as people may not like her or her style, certain people, I don't know if they do or they don't. But if they don't, well, guess what? She did earn it. So I will say that. And then I also think, Thunder Rosa, I don't know, she's pretty darn good. And like you both said, that match was great. And, match of the year, right, Mike?
Yes. Oh, yeah. By most people.
So, I mean, I don't know about Ruby Soho. I'm not wicked impressed with her. I'm a little surprised that she's not better than what I thought she was. What do you guys think about her?
She's certainly showing a lot more than Vince and those folks allowed her to do when she was there. With a slightly different name, Ruby Riott. Let me just throw some names before we let Brittany go. I'm going to just throw a name and have you give some thoughts. Becky Lynch.
Becky Lynch, the man. I don't know. To me, too small, but not a bad worker.
Funny Tucker, how about Ronda Rousey, who's going to be working with Charlotte at WrestleMania?
Well, all I can say is I did not see her return match, but all I can say is I hope she's better as a professional wrestler than she was when she left.
Her heart wasn't in it at the end. I think it hit her hard, getting booed.
Yep.
She just wasn't used to that because she didn't come to wrestling naturally the way you did. She came from an industry. How about, two, I'm impressed with Rhea Ripley. I like badasses, and Bianca Belair has, a lot of athleticism. How about those?
Yeah.
Rhea and Bianca.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm impressed with both of them, especially where Bianca's so small. She's a little girl. She's got a small frame. The stuff she does is pretty surprising for someone her size.
I'm hoping the match from the SmackDown side is Becky defending against both Bianca and Rhea. I don't think that Bayley's going to be ready in time. How about Bayley, from what you've seen of her in her time there in WWE?
I don't think she's excellent, but I think she's very good. She's young. She's, to me, still kind of green, but not really. She's getting there. I mean, she's working hard, I think. Now, has she been out on an injury?
Yeah, she was out for a big injury.
9-10 months and may not
that's
be ready.
Too bad.
Hopefully she'll be back. We were surprised she wasn't at WrestleMania. And then Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss, who's still doing that crazy
female
themed kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Alexa Bliss, I've never been impressed with at all. Sasha, she is from Massachusetts, just like I am. She first started out here. I believe her first match, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, was with our old pal Sheldon Goldberg.
Was she on his promotion, his New England Championship?
Yeah. Yep. I think it was her first match.
Because that's where a total, she calls herself the OG of badasses, Mercedes Martinez. That's where I first saw a tape of her that Sheldon would send and keep an eye on her. And she is a total badass, and she has paid her dues as you did.
Yeah.
It's great to see she's on both Impact, but more so, she had a great match with their former champion. Why can't I think of her name now? And then, of course, with Mickie James, she had a match with, but she's primarily part of AEW.
I was happy to see her there.
Who's the one I'm thinking of in Impact, Russ? Do you know the one that's got both belts now? She's got the Ring of Honor title and the AAA females title.
I haven't watched Impact in weeks, so
Diana Purrazzo. Finally, when I asked her, because I think she had done some stuff in Ring of Honor, and she was in the Jersey, New York, Philly, New England area. Do you have any thoughts on Diana Purrazzo? Have you seen her work?
Yeah, I've seen her. Yeah, she's not bad at all. I like the way she works. I like the way she looks. She dresses the part like a lot of people don't. So yeah, no, I think she's great.
Yeah, she uses the Fujiwara armbar as one of her main finishers. So it's great to see. I like seeing badassery. You were a total badass, and I like today's women that are sort of carrying that on. So, Brittany, we're going to let you go. I really appreciate you.
I was going to ask one other question. That is, now that you've seen Lita come back, does it make you think that maybe there's still a chance you could get back in the ring too? You can never say never. And Lita certainly was one of the folks that was a surprise to see in the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, I was happy to hear that she's back. I thought she was excellent when she worked. And yes, never say never. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, when you're ready to promote the WWA, when you get that together and you're ready to start promoting it again, we'd really like you to come back on the show or send your promoter over here and have him or her talk about what we can do about giving some publicity to.
We'll get the straight poop from Brittany, but Brittany, all I'll say is, as I talk to you almost daily or email you, is that don't put up any of your own money.
Yeah.
We
can get paid for your brain power, but please don't put up any of your own money. I would hate to see any of it lost.
But we would like to help you promote it. We would like to help you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on the show tonight.
Brittany Brown, absolutely. Everybody, the great Brittany Brown. As we salute Candi Divine, we're going to take a short time out and bring up Evan Ginzburg, and we'll have some thoughts on PJ O'Rourke and some other folks that have died besides our friend Candi Divine.
Well, we're not going to take a brief time out because I hate doing the editing. Okay. So we can simply
power through it. I do want to say, well, you hopefully get Ev up, that PJ O'Rourke, who was a political columnist I knew and had interviewed quite a few times, he passed a couple of days ago. That was horrific. We lost, and he was, I think, only 69. We lost WCW longtime referee, and more importantly, he was caretaker for Lord Al Hayes, and referee Mickey J, who came in for about a year and a half to WWE. And before retiring for good, he always came out to the CACs every year in Vegas. But he and Sergeant Slaughter took tender, loving care of Lord Al Hayes. Lord Al Hayes, of course, managed Sergeant Slaughter, who real name Bob Remus, as I think he was Super Destroyer Mark II or Mark III in the AWA when Al Hayes was managing.
And he was my favorite wrestler when I was growing up. Hey, Evan, good to have you back.
How are you?
That's hello.
Mouse mode.
To bring you up so you could say hi to Brittany Brown as we were paying tribute to Candi Divine. But Ev, let me see first of all, because this is, we're paying tribute to some friends of ours. I just mentioned PJ O'Rourke, the noted columnist, who's a humorist and all that, and Candi Divine, and see if you have some thoughts also on Mickey J. Any of them, and then perhaps we lost some other friends too in the last month.
Oh, well, PJ O'Rourke was brilliant.
Yep.
I mean, every time he was on TV, he was so subtle, so sharp. Just a brilliant guy. I was sad to hear that he passed. Yeah.
He had a famous saying. They did a thing on CBS Sunday Morning on him, and they had a soundbite of him saying something like, Democrats believe that government can help stuff, Republicans don't. And then he said something about Republicans say something about it, and then they chastise government, but then they go ahead and run and get elected. And he was showing the hypocrisy there. He was brilliant. He veered back and forth. He actually started out as a Republican, but he would skewer his own party, and he was civil, which we don't see today. And of course, he went after some of the brain dead folks, Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of the other idiots, the governor of Florida. And but he was one of those Republicans who he voted for Obama, and he voted for Joe Biden. You know, if he saw somebody who, he said he held his nose, closed his eyes, voted for Joe Biden because he absolutely was not going to vote for Trump, and got to respect that.
No doubt.
How about Candi Divine, because you had been to events with her. I'm not sure how well you knew her, but shocking somebody so young, wonderful. I was saying she was kind of like a pixie, because Brittany and I would see her every year, you know, a lot of indie shows, but then always at Cauliflower Alley and Moolah's LIWA in Vegas. And, you know, she pulled some gentle ribs, like putting like little smoke bombs in Pat Patterson's Cosmopolitan drink.
Yeah.
Was deal, stuff like that. And she was just a bright light all the time, always upbeat and cheerful, even when stuff in her personal life wasn't so great. She was a wonderful person. But Ev, let me shut up and.
No, I honestly didn't know her. I saw her perform many times, but I didn't have any kind of personal relationship. So, you know, it's just it's a community, and when somebody passes in the wrestling community, everybody, you know, tries to honor them, and, you know, sorry to.
Well, the way I saw her is she was part of that wave of women's wrestling that went from the way it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where it was really like maybe you would have one match a month of women's wrestling on TV, and it was more or less, you know, either the ladies looked like your grandmother in swimsuits, and, you know, you didn't really care much about like the wrestlers in the ring, or it was apartment wrestling where, you know, it was all about, you know.
But the stuff that Evan and I saw in the 70s, for example, Moolah's troupe, they were some badasses, and Evan's talked many times for years about how, geez, if you had Moolah and Vicky Williams or Tony Rose and Donna Christianello, a great heel tag team, they were some highlights for those garden shows, those Tri-WF.
Moolah would come in the 70s and wrestle people like Vicky Williams and Sue Green, and those were tremendous matches. I mean, Moolah had unbelievable heat. She was a real heel, and when she came in, it wasn't like TNA, you know. They wrestled. And she worked that crowd, and they hated her. And when she made her way back to the dressing room, you know, they wanted to murder her. You know, it was an experience seeing Moolah at the Garden in the 70s.
Russell is right they looked a little bit different. They were maybe harder edged versus then the incoming wave. You know, they were more beautiful girls, but they could really legitimate wrestle. The Medusas, the Candies, and then there were, you know.
Then we went through the diva period where they were all models and they couldn't wrestle to save their lives. I mean,
but there was when they had the Jumping Bomb Angels working with Judy Martin and Leilani Kai, the Glamour.
How many matches did the Jumping Bomb Angels get in the WWF?
They were there for about a year and a half, and
not a lot. And they were on TV maybe twice.
Today they
still have the tag team championships, and they never gave them back. The Jumping Bomb Angels, as far as I know, are still the WWE's tag team champions.
No, they've
been running.
They dropped it back to what we would later call the Glamour Ghouls, the Glamour Girls. But it is quite a bit different today. You know, the women's wrestling sometimes could be the main event. Not often, but at times they can have as many matches on shows. You know, sometimes on some of these rampages, AEW Rampage on Fridays, it'd be 2 women's matches and 2 guy matches. So it's refreshing, and the talent is off the charts. There are many top women wrestlers now, more so than I can remember in the U.S., even though they're bringing them in from Mexico and Japan and Canada. We are blessed to have the times that we have, where we've got.
There have been a number of shows where the women's matches have been better than the men's matches.
Oh yeah. Well, like we said, Ev, I'm sure you watched the Bloodbath match that was just about a year ago that we were all talking about, Britt Baker and Thunder Rose.
Yeah.
Remember, Ev, let's get Ev's thoughts on that, because I know Candy would have loved that match. She would have loved what that did for women's wrestling, but Ev hasn't talked about that one.
Well, if you want equality, part of it is, bleeding for your art. I know some people think that's savage today, but, there are female boxers getting bloodied up, and you want equality, there you go. Do what the
You'd
men
think a
do.
lot of women would want to have a Dusty Rhodes forehead, though, or Bruiser
I
Brody.
think that was Hardway. I don't think there was gigging involved in that. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure from what I remember, it was, Hardway. It was kind of unintended, although being a death match, maybe, it was sort of that way. But it was outstanding. Many have voted it match of the year. And it was match of the year on the Busted Open radio show. They've talked about it incessantly, and deservedly so. It was incredible. And
For the first time ever, they have two women headlining the Garden for a boxing card, and they say they're going to sell it out.
Wow.
So it's going to be on DAZN worldwide. You can watch it live, but it's a hot ticket. So women's boxing is finally starting to draw, and
Women's MMA is for real. I mean, it's nobody. It's funny because I remember when I used to watch Batman as a kid. One of the things that would piss me off so much is that Batman would come in to save some girl. He'd be getting beaten up by like 5 guys, and the girl would just cower in the corner. I'm like, would you just pick up a chair and hit somebody with it?
Well,
It's that hard.
Remember, I brought Julie Newmar to Legends. We had that legend on, and man, she was badass. It's too bad she was a little ahead of her time. And back in the '60s, I don't think there was any more beautiful. I hate to being sexist here, but she was badass, which was also one of the most beautiful women on the planet back then. The My Living Doll show, which came on CBS before Batman on ABC, and she was an ass kicker then. She missed her calling. She was very tall. She was like 6'5".
Her and Emma Peel.
Yeah.
The
actress too.
Yeah.
My father drove a taxi in New York in the 60s and 70s. And he used to say that New York is very jaded. And the only people that stopped traffic in New York were Muhammad Ali, who was the most famous person in the world, superstar Billy Graham, because nobody looked like him, and Julie Newmar. He said Julie Newmar would stop traffic in New York because nobody had a body like that.
And that's a great segue because 44 years ago today, superstar Billy Graham lost the WWF championship.
And I was there, and I was a huge Billy Graham mark. And it was a sad night for us,
Tell us about the match. Tell us about watching the match.
Well, the word was out already that Graham was going to lose, so it wasn't shocking. But you still had that hope that at the last second they would change their mind, because just a night or two before, Billy Graham and Bruno sold out the Spectrum in a steel cage match. They were selling out constantly with Graham. Not in every arena, not at the Nassau Coliseum, but, the big matches across the horn, Graham was a draw. But Vince's father was a man of his word, unlike Vince, a man of his word. And he said that Backlund was going to beat Graham on that night. And just as he had said, that was, he came through with it. And Graham, for the past 40 years, has rightfully been saying that he should have been turned heel. He should have gone from heel to face, and he would have been huge as a face. And whenever him and Koloff teamed together, Ivan Koloff, they would feign, they'd start pushing each other, and the fans would 100% be behind Billy. So he was absolutely right. It would have been Hulkamania, 7 or 8 years earlier with Graham. Basically, Hogan, took Billy's act. And so did Ventura. So, it's a shame that they didn't have the forethought to turn this guy face. because it would he could have easily drawn for another year or 2 or 3, no doubt.
Billy said that it was one of the earliest or few times he said that he had asked Vince Sr. said, "Please turn me face." He had a whole idea for marketing T-shirts. Remember, he said that too. Yeah. And he would have been way, way, way ahead of his time. And yeah, it was funny because about 3 weeks before the match, Napola told me in like sworn secrecy, he goes, "You can't blurt this out," So I didn't say a word, but I guess he got it right from the office that Graham was going to drop to Backlund. And Backlund was, Vince had about a year prior to that, or maybe that year, finally joined the NWA. He was not a president since he broke away from it. And Munchnick and Eddie Graham had really pushed Backlund as, the babyface who could replace Bruno. And he had his own popularity, could not replace Bruno. Pedro couldn't do it either. But he did have a magnificent run, like 6 years as tri-WF and then WWF champion.
Yeah, let me just say something about Backlund, because I was there pretty much every month through his entire reign, give or take a few, odd shows I missed. But for the most part, I was there. Backlund was great with guys who could wrestle. Backlund and Patera was match of the year, okay? Backlund and Morocco was great. Backlund and Valentine. Backlund and Slaughter. Guys who could wrestle, Backlund had great matches with. But the big, lumbering, super heavyweights, it was pretty awful. Backlund and Ventura, Backlund and Sweet Hansen, and the big lumbering older guys, Backlund and Bulldog Brower. These were not great matches. Ultimately, what happened was they brought in the Intercontinental belt, to help Backlund's draw. On the major arena shows, you would have Backlund on top, then the Intercontinental belt, then the tag championships, occasionally Moolah, and you would have 3 or 4 title matches on one show, and this helped Backlund's draw. But Backlund was not the draw that Bruno was. Absolutely not.
You look at some of those cards, like maybe 75, or even before that, Bruno's 2 title reigns, historic title reigns. And sometimes the undercards were kind of underwhelming compared to Backlund, where they'd be, some dream matches. It'd be stacked. They didn't need to do that with Bruno because Bruno alone could draw, that crowd. And then you throw in the Valiants, that's all you need. But Backlund's reign, a little bit later on, did Arion stick around? Spiros Arion stick around long enough to have a match with Backlund? Do you remember?
Yes, I saw Backlund and Arion, and they did the whole circuit also. Backlund and Koloff did the circuit. Backlund and Koloff was a great match. Backlund, it was either excellent or like instantly forgettable, depending on the opponent. And in Backlund's book is actually, I wouldn't say great because there's a lot of repetition. It's almost like reading like a loop-de-loop, like he repeats the same thing. But Backlund goes over each opponent's strengths and weaknesses. So it's actually interesting because you saw all of those matches. And Backlund said, guys like Ken Patera and Greg Valentine were phenomenal. Adrian Adonis, Backlund and Adonis was a great match. The thinner, earlier Adonis was a great wrestler. So, I have mixed emotions about Backlund's reign. I mean, I was a much bigger fan of Bruno and Graham and Pedro. But, Hogan also had his pluses and minuses. He was great with Orndorff, great with Piper, and other guys, he just do the leg drop in 8 minutes and it was like the same old thing over and over and over again.
Let me bring up one more moment in wrestling history, and then we can go on to modern day stuff. Today is also the anniversary of the Gary Hart, Buddy Colt, Iron Mike McCord, and Bobby Shane plane crash. Yeah. You guys remember that at all?
Yeah. Bobby Shane was 29 years old.
He was Eddie Graham, the promoter in Florida, had already offered to put up the $20,000 bond for both either or Bobby Shane and Buddy Colt. to be NWA champion. Bobby Shane, just maybe 2.5 weeks before that plane crash, came through. He was on his way to Japan, and he came through and he did 2 matches in LA that I shot. I was so privileged to have shot him against Ed Carpentier, like a dream match. They had never met before. And that was at Olympic Auditorium TV on the Wednesday. And Bobby had to put him over. And then he had a match with Black Gordman on our KCOP. And that was outstanding too. I mean, Bobby Shane, excellent wrestler. So either or, one of those two guys, but he was one of the kings of wrestling that, like Ernie Ladd, way before anyone else, and Lawler, but that was Bobby Shane's whole heel gimmick. Before that, he had an amazing career as a babyface, particularly in Honolulu and St. Louis for Sam Munchnick. But when he went to Florida, grew the mustache, had on the crown and the king's clothing, an amazing wardrobe, and he was great. You remember at our convention in St. Louis in '92, Ev, that his remaining family came, and it was horrible to learn that his widow, who played, I think her name was Barbie, she played his valet Barbie. Anyway, she was in real life married to him, committed suicide like a year after he passed. That's how hard she was at this plane crash.
Yes, and adding to the tragedy was Johnny Valentine was an all-time great, and he never wrestled again. He was crippled up after that. So when you think about quote-unquote fate or dumb luck, basically it was who was seated where on that plane, whether or not they were going to recover, die, or be crippled for life like Johnny Valentine. It was just a
plane crashes. 2 of them. That was a horrific thing. They were not that far apart. And, and then you mentioned Adrian Adonis dying in that car accident a number of years later, just loss of great talent. The first time any of us saw him, he came into LA under his real name, Keith Franks, and Piper managed him in like 77 and teamed with him and managed, and then they feuded, and he was a tremendous talent. And then, of course, he met Ventura in Honolulu, and that's, where they came up with this East-West Connection thing. They did it first.
Sort of like this show, the East-West Connection.
Yeah, that's what Legends, East-West Connection.
We'd like to thank Adrian Adonis for.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Jesse Ventura side of that one. But all right, so let's go on to more recent stuff.
Here's the recent stuff before I've got to go. And this is why. The Summer of Soul, and I know we're not airing when this happens, so it doesn't matter. So if you can go back and look at it on Hulu or something, tonight it's on ABC. Ev, what amazing. I was going to ask you.
I saw it. It's great. I wasn't enamored with Nina Simone, the whole F the police, rhetoric and, kill Whitey. That I was, and I'm a liberal, and I wasn't thrilled with a lot of that. But the music itself was great.
I wanted to ask you because I don't think you've ever. I'm pretty sure you've seen Gladys Knight in concert with.
Yeah, Gladys is amazing.
And how about B.B. King? You've seen him in person.
Oh, yeah, many, many times.
Oh, he was so good. And how about Stevie Wonder opening it with that drum solo? You knew he could play all the instruments, but we've never visually seen him other than the usual stuff he does at the keyboards. Out of this world. Just
I saw Stevie Wonder at Madison Square Garden. You guys will appreciate this. So the show starts at 8. It's just about to turn 11. And he makes an announcement. He goes, I'm supposed to wrap this up, because of union overtime. This is going to cost me $40,000. And he plays for another hour and a half. Wow. He did 4.5 hours.
Now, I was lucky enough to see B.B. King at the House of Blues a few years ago. So, actually, God, now it's more like about 15 years ago.
But at least.
If you want to see an even better R&B movie, check out Soul Power, which is during the Ali Foreman fight in Africa. They had a huge concert, and there's B.B. King, James Brown, the Fania All-Stars, just Bill Withers. Unbelievable. Soul Power, it's called. It's an even better movie than Summer of Love.
So let's talk about Cody Rhodes, the biggest news to hit wrestling since
said it in
laces were invented.
We think it's a work, some kind of a work.
I have no idea, but my point of view always goes back to great matches. In WWE, I could count his great matches as zero. Okay. In AEW, I could count them on one hand. I don't understand the whole fanboy frenzy. Where's Cody going? Where's Cody going?
Remember there was that post about the guy saying he wouldn't take a bath or something.
Yeah, one guy was so upset he was leaving AEW. He said, I'm not going to take a bath. And I'm thinking that's half of first row ringside to begin with. That's not big news. But,
well, it reminds me of when Andy Kaufman is introducing soap to the Southerners.
Cody in WWE doing the handsome Cody Rhodes thing, and then he had to wear the face mask to protect this alleged broken nose.
How many great matches did the guy have? And I'm a fan. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
but
it's how you're booked. It's not so much. It's you're stuck with the Stardust gimmick, which he hated. I
didn't mind that. I liked him and Goldust together. I thought they were a good tag team.
No, he was miserable doing that stupid gimmick with the face makeup and all that. You got to see the real. I got to see him on so many great indies. Once he left. And he was on a slew of APW shows in NorCal, for example. He worked with Pentagon. And that was an out of this world match. He had a couple of, like the Cow Palace thing he had with Joey Ryan before the scandal hit. He had a cage match with Joey. And he met a number of guys, local talents like Dylan Drake. And then all the stuff he did in Ring of Honor and New Japan. So he might have been better than what you might have seen in AEW, particularly New Japan and Ring of Honor when he was with those guys. And I think the people are upset because he is the face, or he has been, of that company. He and Kenny Omega and the Bucks formed that company, but he, more so than anybody, was the face of it. And then kind of overextended himself with the reality show. There's a season 2 coming up of that. Go Big show now in its second season on TBS. So I don't know. I think it's a work, but if not, I would hate to see him go back to WWE because he'll be miserable all over again. What's the point? Although, unless, the side of saying that he actually did leave, it was over money issues with Tony Khan, who wasn't willing to pay him because Tony Khan nobody's ever had a roster like this. Would you agree? At least the roster is WCW in its finest days, say 97, with all the Lucha guys from AAA, the New Japan guys coming in.
Minus Horace Boulder.
Yeah. I mean, it is pretty incredible.
AEW has a great roster and WWE has a great roster. It all depends how you use these guys. And the bottom line is how much money you're going to make with these guys. And you can't sign everybody and you can't pay everybody $1 zillion. And
not everyone can be champion.
I mean, basically, AEW is a TV promotion. They don't run house shows. They just have the pay-per-views every couple of months.
Well, because they started and a couple of months later, COVID hit, and that was the end of.
But I mean, I don't understand why AEW doesn't run Madison Square Garden and major arenas. They would do well. Speaking of that, I want your opinion on this because Mike follows things closer than I do. The rumor is that Bobby Lashley, they knew he was hurt going into Saudi Arabia, that the concussion thing is a work, that the guy was legitimately hurt prior. So right. My question would be, if that's the case, isn't that fraudulent advertising, bait and switch, not only for the Saudi pay-per-view yesterday, which I'll discuss briefly, but also they're advertising heavily that Brock Lesnar's wrestling Bobby Lashley at Madison Square Garden in the main event. Isn't that false advertising if they knew the guy was hurt and this wasn't going to happen?
Card subject to change.
Yeah, well, yeah, he didn't suffer any concussion. That was just the way to get him quickly out of the Rumble when I forget the young kid was thrown into his cubicle, his little squared off, the kid from NXT that just got, he's been
Austin
getting big.
Theory.
Yeah, Austin Theory. They threw him into the thing, and that's how they got Lashley out of that, because it's from what I've been told, it's a shoulder thing, and he may be out quite a few months.
But then why advertise him as headlining the Garden in 12 days from now?
You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And I'm sure AEW, that's where they do things better. Not only they put guys in a better light to succeed. That's why Cody was much more watchable in AEW than WWE, and many others. And
Evan, don't worry. They'll find a way to give Dolph Ziggler a title push before that match happened.
I saw Dolph Ziggler headline the Garden against Cena in the cage, and the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just going, he looks like a nice guy. He looks like a pleasant fellow. There's zero heat. I'm like, how is this a cage match?
That's what they'll do, though. They'll throw Dolph Ziggler in there and say, or they'll get Bill Goldberg just before, 2 days before.
That's the end of his contract. He had X amount of matches, and he's already tweeted out that was probably his last match. But what I was going to say was, I think Tony Khan and AEW would have been more ethical about it and said, okay, this guy, our champion, he's going to have to forfeit his title, and the winner of this Elimination Chamber is going to be the new champion. That would have been the way to do it. And I think
they're trotting out Stone Cold Steve Austin out of incredible mothballs to put him in.
Yeah, but that's going to be a huge draw, and they can just do the greatest hits. He doesn't have to exert much. Kevin Owens is very protected.
He needs a leg brace for his leg braces. I mean, it's Stone Cold.
It doesn't matter. That's going to be a big draw in Dallas. Taker Hall of Fame. Austin against Kevin Steen, who will protect him and take good care of him. And so Austin won't have to do much of anything. No bumps, nothing. And it's more like greatest hits, stunner, drinking beer with the crowd, flipping people off. That's all Austin is. And, obviously the entrance and the music to start things off. But I've got to go in about a minute or two. But you're
gonna miss me mocking WWE's pay-per-view yesterday.
Yeah, not the greatest. Impact was more fun, particularly with the possible breakup of.
Why do you have a pay-per-view 2 weeks after you just had the Royal Rumble? It makes no sense whatsoever.
Because it was a bought show from the Saudis, and they needed a transition between Royal Rumble and Mania. And it was a sold show, so it's free money. I don't know what they got, an alleged 30.
Yeah, free money. That is what Vince needs. Free money.
Yeah, we could all use 30 million if that's what they got out of this. But they have that contractual deal for at least one show a year in Saudi, and
I heard they're going to do a big arena, a big stadium show in England in September.
Well, good. It's deserved, long overdue. I think the crowd will go nuts, and it'll be a big draw for them. But that's the problem. As I am going to have to go, is WWE has all that talent, but I mean, come on, Ricochet. They are not putting these folks in the best light. And yeah, sure, he went over Sheamus, but he's so held back. They don't hold the guys back in AEW or New Japan, for example, or Impact or MLW or many other promotions. Ring of Honor never did. And hopefully they return in April. We're all hoping for that. But a lot of other than Roman Reigns, Brock, Heyman, is there anything interesting in WWE? In my opinion, no.
Well, the problem that I said repeatedly yesterday after this numbing pay-per-view was that really, as far as the men in WWE, Vince loves Reigns and Lesnar, and everybody else is a notch below, or many notches below. So Lesnar comes out at the Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber.
Oh, you forgot The Miz. You forgot to add The Miz to that list.
The Miz is not on that level either. But Lesnar and Reigns are like the Golden Boys, and Lesnar comes out at both the Rumble and Elimination Chamber, and he's just tossing like rag dolls these major stars: AJ Styles, Riddle, Austin Theory, Seth Rollins. They're all like rag dolls that he's tossing around on both shows. and basically it's just saying nobody is on that level. You know who's going to win. Yesterday, every single match, I knew who was going to win. And I barely even watched WWE TV. It was so predictable. You know, oh, here comes Lesnar. You know, he's going to beat all four of these guys.
Last thing, I said this to Brittany, was I hope, I'm following Bully Ray's school of thought, that Becky fights Rhea and Bianca Belair, have a three-way there to be a nice contrast to Ronda and Charlotte.
But it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the women. They had the Elimination Chamber, and you go, there's no chance in hell Doudrop's going to win. There's no chance in hell Nikki Ash is going to win. There's no, you know, just one by one. You go, Belair's going to win because you know she's the one getting the biggest push. And it's just utterly predictable and vanilla. And what I find appalling as well is the so-called wrestling media. They spin it as they're moving the storylines ahead. It's like, no. It's just boring and predictable. It's pointless almost.
Well, speaking of pointless, we are at the point where we're actually at the end of the show. So we'll catch everybody next week, and we'll have more talk about things that are going on in wrestling today. So very good to have you both, and thanks to our guests, Brittany Brown, and looking forward to the next show. Good night, everybody.
And peace to Candi Divine and Mickey J, PJ O'Rourke, and anyone else that we've lost, any brothers and sisters.
Very good. Good night, everybody.